here. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Us being CFLCA, I always forget to introduce myself here. So I'm Kimberly Clark with the California Farm Labor Contractor Association. I am the Programs Manager. So thank you so much for joining us this morning for our webinar on the CalSavers Retirement Program, and specifically how this applies for farm labor contractors. As you heard, this webinar is being recorded. So if you're catching up with us later today or later in the week, welcome. Glad you could join us even there. Before we get started, we always like to give a huge thank you to our sponsors. They help bring this programming to you. And this one in particular, because we're actually providing this resource free to everyone in the ag labor community. So thank you so much for your support from the Zenith, DLL Insurance, Relation Pan American, Mass H2A, CISO, Bravo Ag Group, McKay Krasosco, DataTech, and TransferMex. Again, thank you so much for your support in helping bring these resources to the ag labor community. This morning, we have two presenters who will be helping walk us through the CalSavers program for FLCs. First, we have Jonathan Herrera. He's the Director of Outreach and Education for CalSavers, and he has over 20 years of experience working in personal, small business, and government finance. Prior to joining the CalSavers team, he worked at the State Treasurer's Office, helping California's local agencies invest their idle funds in the local agency investment fund. And he had 13 years experience at Citibank, where he assisted the organization's business development and outreach, and provided wealth management services and solutions for individuals, families, and businesses. Jonathan has a BA in government from California State University of Sacramento. After we hear from Jonathan, we are also going to hear from Ed McClements Jr. He's the president of McClements Insurance Services, and he has over 45 years of employee benefit experience, including the past 30 years serving the ag industry. Formerly, he was the executive vice president of United Agricultural Benefit Trust, branch manager for one of California's largest insurance brokerages, and president of the Agricultural Personal Management Association. Ed has recently taken a leadership position with Western Growers to help better serve the employee benefits needs of ag employers in both California and Arizona. So throughout the presentation, we do invite you to send in your questions. We've got two experts here to help answer your questions. So feel free to use the chat, that Q&A function. We can take questions throughout. And with that, I'm going to invite Jonathan up to share his screen.
Great, thank you so much, Kimberly. And of course, we practiced this on the way in, and I must have done something to toggle my settings. So my screen share was not where I expected it to be, but there it is. Good morning, everybody.
Looks good.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you guys today. Thank you in particular to the Farm Labor Contractors Association for hosting us today, and Ed for joining us today. Over the years, we've done a few events, and we really appreciate, the association's, partnering with us on these important outreach opportunities and educational opportunities. So I'm excited to join you all this morning to talk about how California is working to address the retirement savings access gap that exists in the state. And yes, of course, discuss the state's new retirement mandate and why this is an important compliance issue for you and your peers to be aware of. Let's see, right off the bat, though, I do have to say that, we're excited to partner with Ed on this. We've done this a couple of times. So we always appreciate the opportunity to, work with other organizations who are working to address this retirement savings access gap. But my being here isn't an endorsement of any of the co-presenting firms or their products. We haven't vetted any of them. But thank you anyway for joining us. So I think, the best place to start, I think, is to talk a little bit about, the situation that the state was trying to address when they created the CalSavers program. Then I'll talk a little bit about how we've designed the program and what it will mean for you as an employer to facilitate CalSavers if you were to register for CalSavers in response to this new mandate. And then we'll talk a little bit about how we designed the program for your employees, for the savers. And then we'll have some time for questions. Ed will be able to talk, and then we'll have some time for hopefully a conversation about about the two products and answer your questions for you. So Why is CalSavers needed? What is the situation in the state that the legislature is trying to address when they pass the bill? You know, what it comes down to is nearly half of Californians are projected to retire into economic hardship if they can retire at all, which is really sobering when you think about it. And we think that the key driver of that fact is that there's millions of Californians. This data is a little old. We estimate now it's about 8.5 million Californians who are going to work every day, just like you and I, but lack access to a workplace-based retirement program. And that's really important because the research also shows that workers are 15 times more likely to be saving and be on a path towards retirement security if they have access to a simple payroll deduction savings plan at work. We're talking about just an easy way to save automatically from the paycheck, set it and forget it, you know, making small deposits over time in order to build a nest egg for the future. That number actually goes up to 20 times more likely if the program features automatic enrollment, which is something we are proud to say that, you know, that CalSavers does. But I think, you know, that really speaks to the important role that employers play, you know, not only in the short-term financial needs of their employees, right, issuing a regular paycheck so they can make their ends meet, but also the role that they can play in their long-term financial future also. So knowing that the best way to get folks saving on a path towards retirement security is through the workplace, back in 2016, the legislature passed this bill, which really did two important things. Number one, it did create this new mandate on California employers. But number two, it gave us the authorization to create this CalSavers program as a solution to the mandate that employers can use, you know, instead of going out and finding expensive products to satisfy the mandate. So what the mandate says is any business in the state of California who employs an average of 5 or more employees, if they're not offering an employer-sponsored retirement plan, they'll be required to register for CalSavers and facilitate their employees' access to the program. So what that means in real life is employers who have a qualified retirement plan in place are exempt from the mandate, and businesses had some time, although it's running out now, as we're going to talk about in just a minute, for businesses to go out and start their own qualified retirement plan. But for everyone else, we wanted to create CalSavers as a really simple, fee-free, plug-and-play way for employers to be able to satisfy this mandate. We measure an employer's eligibility by looking at the average number of employees that they report to EDD in the previous calendar year. So that's important. I'm sure a lot of you have seasonal workforces. So the way we'll determine your eligibility is by looking at the quarterly wage reports that you filed with EDD over the last calendar year from January through December. Look at all 4 of those and average them out for the year. And once a business is determined to be eligible based on the previous year's employee data, they will remain eligible for the entire, you know, next period of time until we get fresh data from EDD. That's important because, you know, I would guess that some of you, you know, who have very, very seasonal labor forces, you know, might have a very small number, maybe less than 5 on staff right now if you're not in season, and then we'll gear up later. You would still be eligible for the program again, as long as the average number of employees that you reported to EDD last year was 5 or more. And then in terms of employee eligibility, who has the opportunity to participate in the program, we wanted to make this program as inclusive as possible because, again, we want to make sure that as many workers in the state of California have access to tools that they can use to save for their future. So any of your employees who are collecting W-2 wages from your business, who are 18 years or older and have a social security number or an ITIN are eligible to participate. So you'll see there that this will include your part-time employees, your full-time employees, folks who you might have working with you on a visa. So your H-2A employees will be eligible to participate in the program and will be given access to the program. We'll talk about how you facilitate that piece of it in just a minute. But one of the things we do like to say up front is that we don't see ourselves as intended to replace or compete with employer-sponsored plans on the private market. Again, you know, the goal of this legislation is to address the access gap that exists in the state. So we're already seeing evidence of employers going out and starting their own qualified retirement plans, and that's still a win for the legislation because most importantly, it means that more workers throughout the state are getting access to these tools that we know work to get them saving and on a path towards retirement security. So I'm just going to leave this up for just a second, but we do have this list on the website. I keep saying qualified plan, right? Well, this is a list of the different qualified plans that employers could use instead of registering for CalSavers. So if you have or you go out and start any of these plans that you see on the screen here, you would be exempt from the mandate. And again, the list is available on our website, calsavers.com. If you click on the Help Center, it's the very first question under the Employers tab for frequently asked questions. But let's finish talking about this mandate. So I mentioned registration deadlines. So we launched the program back in July of 2019. And when we did that, it kicked off a 3-year phased rollout of compliance deadlines based on the size of your business. And again, we're talking about the average number of employees that you reported to EDD for the previous calendar year. We're 2/3 of the way through the rollout. Businesses with more than 100 employees were supposed to register by September 30th of 2020, and businesses with more than 50 employees were supposed to register by June 30th of 2021. Now, important to note here, businesses in that first bucket with more than 100 employees, if we've determined that you're eligible and you haven't registered yet, or let us know that you have a plan in place, you might have already started receiving penalty notices from FTB. The businesses in the second bucket with more than 50 employees, you will probably start receiving compliance notices from the state. We call them the due process notices. But basically, we'll send you 3 warnings that you're about to get referred to FTB before it gets referred to FTB for collection. But the important thing to note here is that we're not interested in collecting penalty fees necessarily. If you're in one of these 2 buckets, more than 100 employees, more than 50 employees, and you haven't registered yet, please connect with us. We want to get you up and running. We're much more interested in getting you in compliance and getting your employees saving than collecting penalty revenue. The next deadline for businesses with 5 or more employees, that's coming up really quick. We've got less than 30 days. By June 30th of 2022, you'll need to register for CalSavers and begin facilitating your employees access to the program. I've added this new, if any of you have joined us before, you'll notice this slide looks a little bit different. We've added a new bucket. So as I mentioned, we determine employer eligibility every year when we get fresh data from EDD. So every year there's going to be a batch of employers that we determine are newly eligible, or that's a nice way of saying newly subject to the mandate. Usually these are businesses who had just started or had just crossed that boundary to over 5 employees. So those businesses will be assigned a deadline of December 31st of the calendar year that we determine that they're eligible. So all the businesses that we determine this year based on 2021 data are newly eligible. They'll start receiving notices that they'll need to register for the program or let us know that they have a plan in place by December 31st of 2022. Most important thing to note here, you don't need to be determining, what your average number of employees is. If you have any questions about your eligibility, please reach out to us, and we'll check on you and see what we have, what your average number of employees was for the previous year and when you're supposed to register. So please reach out. Quick note for employers with less than 5 employees. Remember, again, average number of employees that you reported for the previous calendar year. But if that average is 4 or fewer, you're not subject to the mandate. You're actually not allowed to register for the program. But we did open the program for individual participation. So employees of those very small businesses, or if self-employed entrepreneurs, gig workers, other types of contractors want to join the program on their own, they can go to calsavers.com and start their own account. Again, we wanted the program to be as inclusive as possible for folks who are looking for a way to save for their future. Just to give you a glimpse of what we've seen in the agriculture industry in particular, in the overall ag industry, we've identified more than 6,800 employers representing almost 340,000 employees. So, potentially huge impact in the industry and for workers in the industry. And then for farm labor contractors and crew leaders in particular, more than 960 businesses with more than 119,000 employees. So, definitely a lot of businesses out there who need to know about this. So we appreciate that you're joining us today. So that covers the background and sort of the details on the mandate, how it works. In the next section, I wanted to talk a little bit about, how we design the program and what an employer who registers for CalSavers is going to need to do to basically stay in compliance. So, when the bill first passed back in 2016, one of the very first things we did was reach out to employers in all types of industries. But what we wanted to know from employers in particular is what is it about programs on the existing market that make it difficult for employers to offer retirement savings programs to their employees? And over again, we hear these same 3 hurdles. It's the administrative burden, it's the fees, and it's the fiduciary responsibility. So we tried to design CalSavers with all 3 of those things in mind. We've tried to make it as easy as possible for employers to facilitate. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in detail in just a second. There are no fees for employers to participate, so no startup costs, no ongoing costs. The only cost to employers is going to be the little bit of work that it takes to build the CalSavers process into your existing payroll process. But we've got more than 50,000 employers who have registered for this program already and are facilitating this program. And the vast majority of them are telling us that this was a whole lot easier than they thought it was going to be, and appreciate the opportunity that it's provided for them as a business and for their employees. And then, of course, because employers are not sponsoring this program, employers aren't taking on the fiduciary responsibility that they would take on if they do sponsor their own program. So what that means is, if an employer is sponsoring their own 401k or other qualified plan, it's their responsibility to monitor the fees and the investments. And while some of that responsibility can be contracted out, bottom line, it always falls on the employer. And if something goes wrong, their employees, could potentially hold them liable. But with CalSavers, that fiduciary responsibility falls on the 9-member public board chaired by the state treasurer that I work for, and then our relevant contractors, the companies that we've contracted with to run the day-to-day operations of the program and manage the investment. So, we've taken on that fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the program is operating in the best interest of your employees, of the savers. So with that in mind, what does facilitating CalSavers entail for an employer who signs up for CalSavers? Well, that I think can be summed up into 4 easy steps. And the first 2, one-time deals. You'll need to register by your state required deadline and take some time to set up your account. This is an all online process. You set up a username and password. You tell us a little bit about, who at your business is going to be working with us. Sometimes it's a payroll company who's taking over the responsibility. So check with your payroll company to see if they'll help facilitate this program. And tell us a little bit about how you run your payroll so that we can help you get that part set up. The next thing you'll need to do, because this is an automatic enrollment program, you'll need to give us a roster of all of your eligible employees. So again, that's all of your employees who are receiving W-2 wages, who are 18 years or older and have a social security number or an ITIN. You can upload them one by one. You can upload them in spreadsheets. We have different templates that folks use to upload that employee information. But that's going to kick off what we call a 30-day employee decision period, where we'll be reaching out to your employees. It's our responsibility to deliver the program information, not yours, to let them know, that the program's here, and that if they don't opt out, they'll get automatically enrolled in the program. The next step will be for employers to submit contributions for their participating employees with each pay period. And those are really the only 2 ongoing responsibilities for the employer. So you're gonna want to maintain that roster. So when you hire new employees, you want to add them to that roster. When you let employees go or when they leave, you can go in and mark them as inactive to keep that roster clean. And then you'll continue to submit employee contributions for your participating employees with each pay period. And that's it. So relatively simple and no different from any other, retirement savings program that you might end up using elsewhere. A couple of things I want to mention, again, that employers will not experience. So number 1, you will not incur any program fees. Again, no fees for employers. The program is going to be entirely self-sustaining based on the small fee that we charge the participant. Employers don't have any fiduciary responsibility, and employers are not allowed to make an employer contribution. So we often get the question, am I going to be required to make a matching contribution, or are there, any requirements for employers to make employer contributions? Absolutely not. They're not allowed at all. So even if an employer wanted to do a match, they can't do that with CalSavers. And then a couple of things that, we tell employers not to do. Employers should stay neutral in this program, so you shouldn't be encouraging or discouraging participation in the program. Employers can play an important role in helping their employees, be on the lookout for the program. You can keep materials on hand, but we just ask you, don't cross the line of either encouraging or discouraging participation in the program, because you don't want you to put yourself in a position where your employees think that you're giving them financial advice or anything like that. Which brings me to the second one, right? So you won't want to be providing advice about investment options, taxes, or participation in the program. And then employers won't have to manage the investment options, process distributions, or manage any of the changes that an employee has to make. So again, I talked about that fiduciary responsibility earlier. One of the reasons why employers take that on is because one of the roles of the employer when they sponsor a qualified retirement plan is they have to choose, what are going to be the investment options. So with CalSavers, it's all plug and play. All of the investment options, all of the design features are built into the program, and you'll just need to, again, plug it into your systems and let it run on its own. And then again, you won't have to process distribution or manage any of the changes that employees have to make. We got a lot of concerns during the design phase about employers saying, well, employees are going to be knocking on my door, or I don't want to be responsible for handing out forms and collecting them. So we made it so that when employees need to make changes, including if they want to opt out, they'll do it directly with the program, and then we'll make that information available to employers in real time and by email notification, letting them know who's participating and who's not. But again, we wanted to make sure that employers could focus on running their business. We'll be tracking your employee participation and making it available for you when you need it to run your payroll.
Jonathan?
All right, so yes.
Just a couple questions on that last
Sure.
slide. So when they're maintaining their employee rosters, FLCs in particular have a lot of requirements at time of hire. So wanted to clarify, if they're already enrolled in the program, do they need to make sure they're updating those new employees that same day they are hired? Do they have a little bit of leeway? What does that look like?
That's a great question, and one that we actually get a lot from this community. So employers have 30 days to upload their employee from either date of hire or the date they become eligible. So, we've been working with a lot of employers in the farm labor community or in the ag community and helping them determine, what is the best system for uploading employees. Some employers are batching them and uploading them in, every week or sometimes every couple of weeks, just to try to manage that turnover that you guys are experiencing in your business. And then keep in mind, if an employee leaves before you've uploaded them, say they only stick around for a day or two, once they're no longer an employee of your business, you wouldn't be responsible for adding them to the roster. So, we tried to build in some flexibility, knowing that there are industries in the state with high turnover and with, seasonality in their workforce. So thank you for that question. Right, so just looking at those employer responsibilities on a timeline. So again, it all starts off with employers registering their business for the program. Once you register, you'll have 30 days to, set up your account and upload your roster of employees. Again, you could do that by, adding them to the portal one by one or uploading them in batches using our upload templates. We've got Excel templates, other file formats. Let's see, that'll kick off that 30-day employee decision period where your employees will need to make a decision about whether or not they want to participate. After that 30-day employee decision period is up, we will enroll any of your employees who didn't opt out. And then usually looking at the first or second paycheck after that 30-day employee decision period, employers will then start making their contributions for their employees. During that 30-day employee decision period, I think that's a really good opportunity for employers to reach out to their payroll company. We've seen different levels and different types of integration from different payroll companies. So, definitely reach out to your payroll company and see, what aspects of this program they might help you facilitate. And always feel free to reach out to us. We've been working with thousands of employers with all different types of payroll arrangements, so we've got some experience that can help you get those things set up. Let's see. Next thing I wanted to talk about was just quickly talk a little bit about how we designed the program for your employees, for the savers, like what they get access to if they decide to participate or not. So just really quickly on the saver features, we built the program entirely around an automatic payroll deduction IRA, which means that contributions are going to be deducted directly from their paycheck and deposited into an IRA account that's in the employee's name that they own and control at all times. Let's see, the program is completely voluntary for savers. I did mention that it's automatic enrollment, but keep in mind that your employees or savers can opt out or opt back in at any time. There's no obligation for them to participate. We tried to make the program as easy as possible for employees to participate. That starts with the automatic enrollment, right? Nudge them in, get them to exhibit the behaviors that we're hoping that they'll do, getting them to start saving. But for folks who do want to engage and customize their account, they have complete control over their contribution rate, that we have a menu of investment options they can choose from. We want to work with employees to make it as easy as possible. CalSavers accounts are completely portable. So this is great for a workforce or for workers in an industry with high turnover. The saver will get to keep their account even if they change jobs, unlike an employer sponsored plan that's tied to the employer. The CalSavers account will follow them wherever they go. And if they're working for multiple employers, they can make contributions from more than one employer into the same account. In fact, we've seen that about 35% of our current participants have made contributions from more than one employer within a year. So, again, either that speaks to the mobility in the workforce, people moving around, or the fact that, we've got savers who are working multiple jobs, just to make ends meet. And then, of course, we wanted to make sure that the program was low cost for savers. Again, there are never fees for employers to participate. That's because the program is entirely self-sustaining based on the small fee. less than 1% of total assets that we charge the savers. And that just covers the program administration costs and the investment management costs. I think it's important to note that there's no state support involved in this. So we're operating on a small startup loan. But after that, again, by law, the program's supposed to be entirely self-sustaining based on the fees that we charge participants. So we are working on building the program as quickly as possible so we can get those fees down as quickly as possible also for the employees. Just a quick note on ways that employees can customize their account. Again, it is designed as automatic enrollment, so we did have to create some standard or default settings that would come into play if the employee doesn't make changes to customize their account. So for account type, we'll start them off as a Roth IRA. That means that the contributions are post-tax. We think that that's a good thing for employers or for employees because number one, all of the growth that they achieve in their account is tax-free upon retirement. But with the Roth IRA, because the contributions go in after tax, folks can actually withdraw their contributions from the account before they reach retirement age without paying taxes or penalties. So we thought it was good to have that flexibility, particularly with the workforce that we're working with. We thought they'd feel more comfortable if they had access to these funds in an emergency. So they always have access to their contributions without taxes or penalties. Only if they withdraw interest will they ever have IRS taxes or penalties. But if somebody wants a pre-tax option, we do have the ability for them to recharacterize to traditional IRA. So folks who are high income earners or folks who want to take a tax deduction for the current year have that option. Folks have complete control over the contribution rate. So by default, we'll start them off at 5% with automatic escalation. That means we bump their rate 1% every year until it reaches 8%. Again, the idea there is to nudge them into these behaviors and hope that they'll stick with them along the way. But savers have complete control over that contribution rate. They can choose anything between 1% and 100% of their pay, as long as they stay below the IRS maximum, which is $6,000 per year. And we are monitoring that into CalSavers for the employees. So we'll let you know, and we'll let the employee know if they approach that $6,000 limit, and we'll cut them off when they reach the $6,000 for the year. And then of course, savers can turn on or off that automatic escalation feature. And then for investment options, the default setting is built around a target retirement fund so that folks will get, an appropriate investment option based on their age and time to retirement. But what we wanted to do was make sure that, folks who got automatically enrolled had sort of an escape clause, if you want to call it. So for 30 days, we'll put their money into a money market fund where there's no market exposure before we put all of their money into the target retirement fund. And then all of their subsequent contributions will go into the target retirement fund. And then if folks do want to engage and look at the other investment options that we do have 5 total investment options. So we got the target retirement fund and the money market fund. And then we also have a global equity fund and a core bond fund. So those are sort of on opposite sides of the conservative versus aggressive spectrum. And then we also have a sustainable balance fund, or what they call ESG, which stands for environmental, social, and governance. So folks who want to invest, in socially responsible, environmentally responsible companies will have that option too. So again, I think key message here, we do have some defaults because it is designed as an automatic enrollment, but we wanted, we encourage employees to engage and customize their settings so that they can have something that they feel comfortable participating in the workplace. Let's see, this is probably a really important slide. I know everybody's going to get a copy of this. I know this is being recorded, but this might be a good time to pause your screen if you are watching the recording later. But this has all of the different ways that you can contact the program. So the website is a wonderful tool and resource for both employers and savers. We've got, for employers like you, we've got tools, tips, templates, program details, materials that you can use to help spread the word about the program with your employees, all the registration timelines and frequently asked questions. But I know that sometimes folks just want to pick up the phone and talk to a real person. So we have dedicated customer service lines for both employers and for savers employees. They're available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday. Call centers managed by our administrator of the program. So again, wonderful customer service team, multilingual, of course, English and Spanish speakers on the phone at any time and access to a language line. They've been helping folks in dozens of languages since we rolled out this program, and we're really proud of the support that folks are getting over the phone. And then we even offer, one-on-one support for employers as they go through the process. We've got a dedicated onboarding team at the call center whose job it is to reach out to employers and help them, get everything set up. We also have a team of in-state representatives 7 folks based throughout the state, so that employers can have local one-on-one support. They can, come out to your business and help you get things set up. They can meet with you virtually if you're more comfortable doing that. They even do presentations for employees. So if you wanted to invite us out to your place of business, we can come out and talk to your employees and answer questions. That team is also multilingual. They can do presentations or talk to folks in English, Spanish, Cantonese, and Mandarin. Field support at CalSavers.com is the best way to get a hold of that group. But again, wonderful group of folks that we have available to support employers through this process. I added a few frequently asked questions that we get from agriculture. I don't know if you want me to go over them really quickly, or if we want to save it for the questions that might have come in the queue already.
I think it's good to answer these questions now. This is good stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Thanks,
And then we
Ed.
do have a couple of questions in the chat, which Jessica had asked about what materials are available for employers to help facilitate, particularly as you said, Jonathan, employers shouldn't be encouraging or discouraging. I think that last slide went over it in a really great way. I believe there's also just the basic printouts explaining the program and available in all languages. Are those just online?
Yeah, so online you'll see, the basic printouts. You can get copies of the welcome kit or the employee information packet. Right now, those are available in 10 languages on the website. We also have pre-written like letters or communication template that sort of explain how the program works that we've had employers print out and attach to people's pay stubs and things like that. Just different tools that you could use and keep handy, so that if employers come to you with questions, you can say, here's some materials that we have for you. Or like I said, with the communication template, you could actually get ahead of it, say, hey, we're going to be doing this, keep an eye out for information from the program so that you know what's coming. And again, all of that stuff is available in 10 languages right now. We'll have it up to 15 relatively soon.
Excellent. Yeah, we love to see the multiple languages supported, so thank you for that. This is kind of jump into your second question here with the turnover. Oh, nope, sorry, I missed Rob's question. Rob had asked, and I'm so glad that we have that support of actual human beings, so we know where we could take future questions like this. But just since we have you, Rob had said that many employees do not actually have phones. So what do we put in the mandatory phone number field?
Right, that's right. So the phone number is a mandatory field. So, we just ask that you provide us with the best available contact information that you have for your employees. So if they've given you an emergency contact or something like that, feel free to add that. Other than that, I'd say, if you're struggling with any of those particular things, reach out to that field team. They've worked with tons of employers, in that situation, just like you, and they could probably give you some additional advice on how you might want to handle that.
Great. I'm going to skip to your second bullet point here about the turnover, which we addressed a little bit. We had a specific question coming in. Are employers required to upload the file for all employees, even if they are seasonal or work for just a few days before they left the company? Sometimes we have employees that work literally one day before they leave. So how would they approach that?
Yeah, we do get that question a lot. So, it's a 30-day requirement. So employers will have 30 days to upload their employees into the system. So again, that gives employers a little bit of flexibility about how they want to do it. We've had some employers that find it easier to just upload them on the day of hire. You're adding them into payroll, might as well add them into CalSavers. We've had other employers that, because of that high turnover, are thinking, you know what, I'll upload my batches, in weekly batches or bi-weekly batches. As long as you're doing it within 30 days of eligibility, you're in compliance. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, if an employee only stays around for a day or 2 days and you haven't uploaded them yet, they're no longer your employee. So when you do get around to uploading that batch of employers, you just won't include them in the roster. But, to answer the first part of the question, employers do want to include in that roster any of their currently active employees. Even if they're just seasonal or part-time employees, they'll be included in that roster. If they're on if they're on staff at the time of upload, then you'll want to get them uploaded in there, have them included.
Thanks, Jonathan. Before we move along to Ed, I would love to hear the answer to this H2A question, and then also the employer responsibilities. That'd be great to address.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the H-2A workers are counted and included in the census because, again, your eligible employees will include any employee who receives W-2 wages from you, is 18 years or older, and has a Social Security number and ITIN. So H-2A or other visa status, doesn't matter. They're eligible as long as they're 18 years or older, receive W-2 wages, and have a Social Security number and ITIN. And then again, same with your seasonal employees. When they're on staff working for you during the season, you'll want to have them added on the roster. And then of course you can deactivate them when they leave. Employees who come back to you can simply be reactivated, once they come back, and they'll be able to continue with the program in whatever their current settings were when they left. So if they had opted out before, they'll stay opted out. If they were participating, then they'll continue to participate at their old settings. So again, we wanted to build in that flexibility for employers that did have, the seasonal and, less traditional workforce. Let's see. And then the answer to am I responsible for tracking enrollments, opt-outs, and changes to contribution rates? We hear this a lot because we know that, there are organizations out there who are, maybe a little bit less informed on how the program works than we are. And they've been telling folks, oh, you're going to be responsible for tracking the enrollments, and every year you'll have to be tracking who's going to be automatically escalated. But we want to, folks to rest assured that we are tracking all of that information for the employer. Again, employees will work directly with the program anytime they need to make changes. If they're opting out, if they're enrolling in the program, if they want to make changes to their contribution rates, that'll all be done directly with CalSavers. We'll track that information and make it available to employers in real time. And then as you're registering for the program, you'll set up notification. You'll set up your notification preferences so that we can send you or your payroll person an email a number of days before payroll that you choose, so that you can get the fresh information on who's participating and who isn't. So we'll track that information for you. It won't be your responsibility. Your responsibility will just to be, to check to see if there were any changes. And again, we'll have that information available for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jonathan. As he mentioned, right, we've got a recording going, and we'll also send out a copy. I think that slide with all the resources, including how to access real life human beings to answer your specific questions, is going to be really helpful. So thank you so much for sharing that, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, with that, we're going to shift a little bit here. Ed, if you'd like to bring up your screen. And as you have all heard, of course, we are taking questions throughout, so feel free to use that chat, that Q&A, because like I said, we've got two experts here. Take advantage of their time that they're helping us with here. Your screen looks great, Ed, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Jonathan. There are some, I think CalSavers is a phenomenal program. It's got tens of thousands of employers participating, is probably doing a phenomenal job of helping Californians start saving for retirement. But there are some heartburn issues, I think, especially when it comes to the agricultural sector. And I kind of got pulled into this by one of my large strawberry growers. They had mentioned their concern about how they were going to implement CalSavers. We did some research. I hired a legal team to help put together some documentation. And we've come up with an option that we think mimics a lot of the important elements of CalSavers, but eliminates some of the heartburn issues. So let's touch real quick on some of those heartburn issues for employers. Certainly there's the deadline that's coming up. Everything does need to be done as soon as possible. If you haven't already started seeing penalty letters, you're probably in one of the groups that aren't 100 or more, and you will probably, even if you only have 5 employees, start needing to pay attention to this, because as Jonathan mentioned, the deadline for even groups as small as 5 is coming up at the end of June. There's also the penalty for non-compliance. Jonathan touched on that. It can be a significant amount of money. We'll come back to that point in a minute. The broad worker eligibility, as you just heard, even your H-2A employees, anybody who's 18 years old or older and has a W-2 wages with you is going to be eligible for these programs. The automatic enrollment is also something that creates some confusion with people. Why are you taking money out of my paycheck when I haven't signed off on anything? Well, CalSavers does explain how that works, and employees need to be directed to CalSavers. We see that as a potential issue for employers, though, because employers are probably going to be the first line of defense when the employee is upset about what's going on with their paycheck. Now, as Jonathan pointed out, CalSavers is created with an eye toward the federal requirements of most retirement plans, which comes under a broad topic of ERISA, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974. This put a lot of burdens on employers to make sure that they did right by their employees when they set up retirement programs, and those responsibilities can be significant when you're setting up 401ks and other kinds of qualified retirement plans. CalSavers avoids that responsibility by, in essence, being the plan sponsor. Employers are not involved, but that creates somewhat of a double-edged sword because you can't really engage with your employee on some direct communications. Most importantly, the employer really can't accept waiver forms directly. And in agriculture, with the groups I've worked with, we see the vast majority of employees are not interested in saving for retirement at any point in time. Their savings concept is sending money back to family in Mexico and building a nest egg in their country of origin and maybe moving back there at some time in the near future. So a retirement plan in the United States isn't something a lot of a typical farm labor contractors employees is interested in. There's also the know your customer requirements. Maybe we'll bring Jonathan back in at the end here to touch on this, but as part of what CalSavers needs to do is in setting up an IRA for each worker, there is some background, not really a background check, but there is basic verification of the identity of the individual, Social Security numbers, etc. So when people fail that, the information that you're sending in as a payroll list will be, in essence, screened by CalSavers to figure out who actually is eligible with name, date of birth, Social Security number to open up an IRA account. If they fail that, they will actually be shown back to the employer as somebody who is not enrolled in the program. So all of that issue creates somewhat of an uneasiness with employers. And the ongoing data upkeep, again, you're not having to keep track of the changes for employees. Employees are supposed to communicate directly with CalSavers. CalSavers will put it on their website, their secure website. Your payroll system will need to link to that information, though, because ultimately, as the payroll payer, you're going to have your system in sync with the CalSavers system. So in terms of the requirements, the penalties, you are going to be notified with multiple letters, emails, etc. from CalSavers to make sure you're aware of the potential for penalties if you're not in compliance. If the penalty actually does get generated, it's a $250 penalty, and that $250 penalty will be sent to you by a letter from the Franchise Tax Board. And if you stay out of compliance beyond a period of 180 days, is my understanding, that penalty can be increased to another $500, so a total of $750 per worker. This is actually a copy of a letter I received. I blacked out all the pertinent information from the employer, but this was back in February, and they were very concerned about seeing a $55,000 penalty letter coming to them from the Franchise Tax Board because they had not participated in the CalSavers program as of yet. We were able to get this straightened out and save that employer that amount of money without having to directly participate in CalSavers. We'll talk about our Easy Savings for You program in a few more minutes. So to understand really why this can be a problem for employers, CalSavers, with its hired company, Census, which specializes in employer state-based retirement programs, creates an information flow. You hire an employee, you're going to give that information to CalSavers, then CalSavers is going to contact the employee gets to decide whether or not they want to opt out or make a change in that default 5%. Then CalSavers notifies the employer, and then every time you hire an employee, you're going through that cycle. So, don't forget, even if you've gone through that cycle, anytime employees want to make a change, that you're always going to have to be able to have your payroll system sync up with that CalSavers data flow. But the employer, most importantly, can't accept the opt-out form. And we think that that's probably one of the biggest issues that create a problem for agriculture, because we're seeing a majority of employees aren't interested in having 5% of their payroll automatically deducted and put into the CalSavers program. So making sure that they have a simple method to opt out, and having the employer be able to give that form to the employee, have that form signed and given back to the employee, is something that we try to do to simplify the process. Some employees, as I said, will be ineligible for the CalSavers program. Our program kind of avoids that issue. And employees who opt out late must go through a process to get their money back. In other words, if somebody isn't paying any attention to their paycheck and they do have 5% taken out for a couple of months, and then starts paying attention and says, no, I don't want to participate in CalSavers, they do have to contact CalSavers and liquidate their IRA. And that isn't an instant process. So there are a lot of industries, agriculture, janitorial services, home health care, etc., where we've seen a need for as simple a process as possible for employers. Especially in agriculture, where there's generally week-to-week payrolls, and those payrolls are based on hours worked. There's a whole lot of calculation, and I don't have to tell people in the farm labor contractor industry that it's a big chunk of the labor of your office staff is keeping track of payroll. Adding another connection to having to contact CalSavers before you figure out payroll each week is just another thing that creates frustration for a lot of employers. Now, there are payroll systems out there. I noticed that DataTech is even sponsoring this webinar. I'm very familiar with the folks at DataTech. In fact, we've even put together a video about how our program interfaces with the DataTech program. So it is something that can be achieved, and I'm sure DataTech has worked things out with CalSavers, and the vast majority of payroll services do have connections. But in agriculture, there's a lot of companies that do their own payroll or have a custom built system for payroll, and that system really does need to figure out how to integrate the data flow of CalSavers before payroll can be run each week. So a lot of employers have been asking, is there a simpler way that they could meet this mandate? And that all comes down to one of the options that Jonathan's slide showed, that employers can provide employees with access to a payroll deduction retirement program. And this would also, the program we're outlining would avoid any employer funding. It wouldn't require any employee match, would avoid any high cost for plan documentation. There's no annual submission of documents to the IRS or annual audits that are required like some retirement plans. And it keeps the employer, though, in charge of the employee information. The employer doesn't have to send, under our program, a set of data to anyone. They keep it internally, and that puts the employer in the position to be able to directly communicate with their employee about what's going on within the program, what's the employee want in terms of deductions, and if the employee wants to opt out, a super simple one-page form can be given at the time of hire, and the employee can immediately decide to opt out if they're not interested. And our program does maintain the employer's avoidance of these ERISA fiduciary responsibilities and the reporting and disclosure that comes along with ERISA fiduciary responsibility. We call our program Easy Savings for You, and it's been around now for multiple years. In fact, I was involved very much with getting Jonathan involved with the ag industry. With Jonathan, we presented to the Grower Shipper Association, Salinas, people in Ventura, the the California Farm Labor Contractors Association. I think this is our third webinar doing this thing together. Again, there's nothing about CalSavers that has endorsed our program. CalSavers and the state's programs will only speak to their issues and how their program works. They haven't done anything to, quote unquote, authenticate or approve our program, but we have hired attorneys to help make sure that we were doing things right off the bat as efficiently and as appropriately constructed program. So what makes our program, we think, better in terms of simplification? Well, it gives the employers a path for creating what we call a payroll deduction IRA with automatic enrollment. PDIRAWAE is the acronym. Puts the employer in control, lets the employer accept waiver forms. There's no intermediary between the employer and employee on these issues. We offer, in our program, we suggest a lower automatic enrollment amount. We suggest $10 per paycheck as a default amount. The employee can certainly increase it, can turn it into a percentage amount if they want to, but a $10 per paycheck is easier, we think, to calculate, especially when employees don't want to participate until they actually see these deductions coming out and they want their money back. It's a lot easier to generate information flow when you're talking about a set dollar amount per paycheck. Again, our program is set up to avoid ERISA plan status and therefore avoids all of the IRS and DOL rules and regulations that come around with 401k plans and other qualified retirement plans. And it does offer a professional team. Myself, my staff, and 2 legal advisors are involved with our program to get involved if there's ever actually any material question that involves legalities of the program. Now, what we aren't, Easy Savings isn't a retirement company. It's a concept that we've given to the ag workforce, and it's been very successful with about 100 different employers, but we ourselves are not a company. My company is McClements Insurance Services, and I got involved with this again because I'm trying to help simplify the CalSavers mandate for some of my ag employers. It's not something that you give to your, it is not a retirement plan that you give to your employees. Your employees are going to be given paperwork that allows them to understand that deductions will be taken from their pay if they don't opt out, and those deductions are earmarked for their retirement, for their IRA programs. But each employee does need to become an owner of their own IRA to deposit those funds. We're not a retirement plan administrator. We're not an IRA custodial trustee. Again, each employee will pick their own custodial trustee, whether it's a Wells Fargo bank or Fidelity Investments or Charles Schwab or a local credit union. Each employee is free to pick their own holder of their IRA funds. We don't do any investment advising either to employers or employees, and we encourage employers to also stay out of the advising of employees on their retirement savings. Let that be handled by their retirement plan advisor, whichever one they pick. And by no means is Easy Savings for You really the right answer for all employers, but we did build it specifically to be accountable to the ag sector, especially farm labor contractors seem to be the most likely employer type that uses a program like ours. So Easy Savings for You is a collection of concepts assembled by 3 professionals aimed at relieving the stress points of CalSavers. We have our own website that you can go to, easysavingsforyou.com. It's got a lot of information about CalSavers, and it's got webinar or recorded videos with over 5 hours of background information on everything from CalSavers to the basics of ERISA, understanding fiduciary responsibilities, understanding 401ks, because we think anybody who wants to help employers save for retirement is probably better suited to look at a 401k, because our program, like CalSavers, does not allow employer contributions. Now, the one difference that we have with CalSavers is there is a cost for our program. There's a one-time upfront cost of $2,000. There's no ongoing costs. There is no reporting of information to us on an ongoing basis. That $2,000 simply pays for the paperwork cost of us customizing your plan documents to be able to give in English and Spanish an announcement form to your employees that helps explain what's going on, and opt-out forms or opt-back-in forms, or a designation of where my IRA funds should go with the routing number and account number for their IRA. We've done everything we can to kind of think through all the issues that an employer will need to set up their own payroll deduction IRA program with automatic enrollment. So between Doug Kerr and Mary Jane Eatson and myself, we've been working with employers now for a couple of years, helping to set up these types of programs. That $2,000 does get you a binder like this. Not sure if you can see it through Well, it's blocking it out, unfortunately. But there's a large binder with customized forms that each employer gets and walks them through the process of setting up these programs and what they need to do to go on the CalSavers website to check the box to simply tell CalSavers, we do have a program that complies. It is a payroll deduction IRA with automatic enrollment. And if it turns out that there's any issues that get thorny in any way, shape, or form, our program, the $2,000, does include up to 2 hours of free legal support to answer questions that might come up, either directly with an employer or possibly on behalf of an employer with a regulator from the state of California. So to summarize, we believe CalSavers is doing a phenomenal job of helping employees save for retirement while lessening as much as possible the burden on retirement plan administration on the employer sector. But for situations where the demands of the payroll system are already significant, some employers, we think, will welcome an alternative that puts them more in direct control of the information flow without involving outside resources. And if you fall into that kind of category, we think you might want to take a look at our Easy Savings for You program before deciding that CalSavers is the right solution for you, or a 401k, or any of the other options.
Thank you so much, Ed. Yeah, that actually leads into a couple of the questions. We've got Jonathan back here. Let me just remove the spotlight. So with these last couple minutes, we did want to address some of our audience questions. And like I said, Ed, you just gave a great transition into Mateo's question. How can payroll services provide this employee information to either a system such as Easy Savings for You or for CalSavers? So how does that connection work?
Well, actually, we spent some time with the folks over at Data Tech, and we actually have a video that we can direct people to. If there's anybody who's got Data Tech and wants to know questions, find a way, if you would, Kimberly, of getting me that information. I'll send them a copy of that link. It's like a 6 or 7 minute video where somebody from Data Tech explains where to go on their screens to make the connections and make it appropriate. And I believe that was all set up also for coordination with CalSavers too. So it can work in the Data Tech program for coordination of how payroll will work with both CalSavers and how the employer with Data Tech would keep track of employer decisions with Easy Savings for You.
Thanks, Jonathan. Could you speak to that more generally and with CalSavers?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've been working really, really hard over the last few years to try to encourage as many payroll companies as possible to work with us, to integrate their systems into CalSavers. We've achieved, full 360-degree integration with a couple, and then, we've worked with dozens, if not hundreds of payroll companies around the state. And, with the others, the level of integration depends, sometimes the payroll company is working to pull the information from CalSavers before doing the information. Other times, they're leaving that responsibility up to the employer to provide them any changes that have happened with the CalSavers, which of course, we make available on the website, available in real time. And then providing employers with the reports to send back to us, or sending them automatically for employers. So, best thing to do, reach out to your payroll company, ask them what level of support you can expect from them and how they're willing to integrate with CalSavers. And then if they don't have integration set up yet, we've got a dedicated line for payroll support, for payroll companies to reach out to us so we could start the process of integration. And we're hoping that the more employers out there bug their payroll companies about integrating with us, the quicker they'll come to the table and work with us to get that accomplished.
Thanks, Jonathan and Ed. We have a couple questions here about the opt-out. So I think this is going to be twofold again with CalSavers and with other programs, Ed. So Jennifer had asked, as the employer, can they provide the opt-out information? Can they take the form from their employees and mail it in? She says that most of her employees choose to opt out and they don't actually have a reliable mailing address. So can she help facilitate that?
Jonathan, why don't you go first? Yeah.
Yeah, so from the CalSavers perspective, we would say don't take the forms from, the completed opt-out forms from your employees, right? The employees should be working directly with CalSavers in order to opt out. We do have the forms available on the website, so you can keep them in your office, you can have them available, hand them out to your employees. But remember, employees should opt out directly with the program. And actually, I would recommend, it's much better, quicker, and more efficient to have them call the 800 number to opt out, or go online to opt out, because that's done in real time. It's reflected right away. So if you're already up against payroll and they haven't opted out yet, if they come to you, they can call up, opt themselves out, and it will show up right away on the CalSavers employer portal. I think bottom line is, you don't want to be in the position where, you have collected an opt-out form and it doesn't make it to CalSavers in time before payroll. So you're still required to take out the contribution, and then your employee comes to you and says, hey, I opted out with you. You knew I didn't want to do that. That it just puts you in a position where, you've set an expectation with your employee that something is done, when it might take some time to do it if you haven't had them get on the phone or go online to do it.
So you could facilitate it by giving them the phone number, putting them in front of the computer with the page already up.
Right.
Okay. And then Rob had actually asked a question specifically, kind of the same here. He asks, can employers obtain the opt-out forms from their employees for the Easy Savings for You program?
Well, they can if they pay the fees. Yeah, that is a critical part of how our program works. And we don't think it's appropriate to just hand out an opt-out form. There is an announcement form. We do help employees understand the importance of saving for retirement and why the CalSaver mandate exists, that the state of California is interested in helping every worker save for their retirement. So the announcement form, along with the opt-out form, become two central pieces of documentation that we think is essential before just simply giving somebody, any employee, a form to sign and say, okay, opt out here and we're covered. I think there does need to be a basic amount of information communication between employer and employee. Our program facilitates that, and we'd be happy to work with anybody who thinks that a direct communication with their employees is the most appropriate way for them to go about this mandate.
Thank you both. I know we're going a couple minutes over here, but just a few more questions. From the employee standpoint, for each of these programs, Diana asked, if we have an IRA in the bank, can we roll these programs over into that?
Well, with our program, yes. If any of the workers already have an existing IRA, by all means, the employer would facilitate a deduction from a paycheck into that existing IRA.
And from the CalSavers perspective, so you can roll monies into the CalSavers program from another, IRA that's outside of CalSavers or out too. So I'm not sure if they were asking, can you do rollovers to or out of CalSavers, but the answer is both. So yeah, employees have control over those funds and can transfer money out or transfer money in. I always recommend, though, consult with a tax advisor on that one, because if you move funds between unlike accounts, there could be, taxes and well, at least taxes involved, sometimes penalties. So.
Thank you both. One more question here, and a big one for our FLCs and the ag community. Could you please speak further about ineligible employees? Are resident aliens eligible? And if an employee is found to be ineligible due to false documentation, does that in turn put the onus on the employer to terminate the employee's hire? Jonathan, you want to take a crack at that one first?
Yeah, I'll go first on that one. So first and most importantly, it absolutely does not put an onus on an employer to terminate an employee's hire. So let's get that part out of the way. But as Ed mentioned, and we're never shy about, it is a financial product. So federal law requires that we do what they call a know your customer check. Basically a verification of your employee's information. So that process is done via our program administrator. And they have a very, very strict privacy policy and instructions not to share that with anybody, including the state. So the state doesn't get access to that. No other government or private agencies have access to that. And in fact, it's a whole lot more common than you think, right? An address, someone could have recently moved, someone could have gotten married and only recently changed their last name. Any number of reasons could could cause for, you know, a failure in any of that information. So what we do is we'll reach out directly to the employee to see if it's information that we can correct. If we can correct it, we do so, and then they'll become eligible for participation. If not, then you as the employer just simply won't do contributions for that employee. But we won't communicate any reasons to the employer as to why that failed. You'll just see it as they're not participating.
And in our program, it's not as much of a program or problem because you're not sending information outside of the employer. The employer's in direct communication with the employee. The employee is told they need to go open up an IRA and give to the employer the bank routing number and the account number for their IRA. If it turns out that the employee can't do that because their information isn't good enough to open an IRA with a local bank or credit union, etc., that's information that the employee knows, not the employer. And so the employee would be simply, if they didn't do anything, would be defaulted out for not having supplied back the information within a timely manner to the employer. If the employer did come back, the employee could be given an opt-out form. So the information about why they didn't want to participate in the program stays inside the employee's hands, and the employer doesn't have to get directly involved with that process. And if the employee opts out, the employer is able to take in that opt-out form directly without having to involve any state agencies or retirement plan administrators.
All right. Looks like we've got some great questions. Thank you. We went a little bit over on the time, so thank you to both of our presenters as well as everyone for staying on with us. Really like to get into some of these details specific to FLCs. So with that, this is being recorded, so you can go back and review it. We're also going to send out copies of the presentations, that great slide from Jonathan with the contact information if you have questions, as well as information from Ed if you want to reach out. And we look forward to having everyone enrolled by, what date was it, Jonathan?
June 30th.
Oh, I'm on mute. June 30th.
Thank you so much. And thank you again to all of our sponsors. Like I said, we'll be following up, so keep an eye on your emails for those resources. And thanks so much for being with us, Jonathan and Ed.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.